If you want to run and lift and fuel your performance properly whilst not making the same mistakes beginner hybrid athletes make, you're in the right place. In today's video, I'm going to take you through those mistakes so you can avoid making them. But first, if you're new here, hey, I'm Lily. I'm an online Hyrox and strength coach, and I'm also a digital nomad traveling the world, and probably just like you, trying to improve my strength and running. So make sure to hit subscribe and let's get into the video. The most common mistake I see with beginner hybrid and Hyrox athletes is not eating enough carbs. Now this usually comes from them absolutely nailing their high protein diet and then probably doing that from a calorie deficit point of view, because that's probably what they've worked on before. However, when you're training for Hyrox and hybrid training, you really need adequate carbs to fuel that training. So the biggest mistake I see is not only low carbs, but that leads to then low overall calories. Carbohydrates are the fuel that your body uses for essentially all of your hybrid training. Picture it almost like the petrol that you put in your car. The petrol that you need in your body is carbohydrates. Which brings us on to the second mistake I see hybrid athletes making with their nutrition, and that is the type and timing of those carbs. Okay, let's say you've listened to the mistake number one and you've decided to get your carbohydrates up in your diet for your hybrid training. Now you're on your run and your stomach is starting to hurt. Now, if you've ever experienced this, it's not nice, but it usually comes down to the type of carbohydrates you've fueled that run with. There's essentially two different types of carbs we need to think about. The first is complex carbs, so things like oats, brown pasta, brown rice, whole grains. And then simple sugars, and that is things like white rice, white bread, white pasta, and also things like jam and energy gels. Now, our complex carbs are oats and our whole grains. Sorry about this measly bag of oats that I've got. I've found a better bag of oats. These complex carbs, like our oats and our whole grains, take longer to digest. This is often where the mistake is made. It's likely that you fueled that run with complex carbs, which take longer to digest. Therefore, when you're a little bit further into your run and the blood gets taken away from your digestive system to your muscles, that's when your stomach really starts to hurt and you might need to rush to the toilet. You can correct this by fueling your runs or your aerobic sessions for simple sugars, and my favourite is jam on toast. Avoiding protein or high fibre food is also going to be quite important about 3 or so hours before your run or your conditioning session. This is for a similar reason. It also takes longer to digest, and also protein isn't a fuel source for your sessions, so we just want to avoid having that in the sort of 3 hours or less lead up to your run or your aerobic session. We actually want that post-workout to fuel our recovery. Having said that, you don't need to be sipping on a shake as you walk out of the gym or as you do your cool down from your run. What's more important is you get a well-balanced meal within 1 to 2 hours post-workout or run, and making sure that that has at least over 25 grams of protein in. The reason for that is that is the level that activates your anabolic threshold. We can go into more detail on that in another video if you'd like that, but just make sure you get a well-balanced meal in post-session and carbs pre-session to fuel that performance. The last big mistake I see with hybrid athletes comes down to the whole food versus processed food debate, and this is where it gets a little bit controversial. On the one side, you have the die-hard Whole Foods team where they say you shouldn't eat anything ultra-processed. And on the other side, you have the previous calorie deficit, MyFitnessPal enthusiastic barcode scanners who might have 5 protein products in a day and their veggie powders substitute for their green. So where should you be on that scale for a hybrid athlete or someone who's working towards their Hyrox performance? You might not expect this answer from me, but I'm actually more on the side of the whole foods diet side. However, I do know and I would suggest that you incorporate some processed to ultra processed foods to fuel that performance. However, if you can get most of your diet from whole foods, please do that. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, I've just realized my bikini's right behind me. Sorry guys. What I would suggest is whole foods for every meal, and then using slightly more processed stuff to fuel your performance. So for example, let's say you wake up and you are gonna get out for a run. You are gonna have, to fuel that run, let's say my favorite, jam on white toast. Those are more processed foods, they're not whole foods. Once you get back home from the run, you could have egg whites and eggs to boost your protein up. That's a completely whole food. You could pair that with sweet potato to get your carbs in. You could have a side of veggies. My personal favorite post-workout meal is a bowl of protein oats. I make this with milk and eggs and a little bit of salt. Sometimes I put protein powder in there as well, and then I top it with honey and blueberries, usually frozen blueberries. And you can see that that is mainly whole food, but it, like, when I add the protein in, it does have a little bit of sprinkle of processed foods in there. And then let's say you then have your lunch at lunchtime. Maybe it's I don't know, quinoa, chicken, roasted veggies and a bit of avocado. Nice whole food balanced meal there. And then maybe you have a strength session in the afternoon and you want to fuel that strength session maybe with some honey pre-session. Let's pair that honey with apple or banana to fuel that session. And then you could even be having some post-workout protein. Could be a protein shake if you wanted to go a little bit more on the ultra processed side, or you could have, let's say, some flavored tuna like relatively soon after your session, and then have a balanced meal when you get home. So you can see there that we're using the processed foods to fuel the performance or fuel the recovery of your session. However, I wouldn't suggest having like loads of processed food in your main meals, if that makes sense. If you have any questions about that, please put them in the comments below or send me a message on Instagram. But that's how I like to approach things. That's how I like to approach things with my clients as well. Whole food basis, and then a sprinkle of ultra processed or processed foods in there to help fuel our performance and recovery. If there's just one thing I want you to take from this video, it's to make sure that you are adequately fueling your training sessions and your runs with carbs pre-run and workout, and protein and carbs in a well-balanced meal post-workout. If you would like any help with this at all, send me a message on Instagram. My link is down below. And also, I have created a free nutrition guide for female hybrid athletes, and the link for that is below as well. It's an easy 6-day email guide. If you've enjoyed this video, please click like and subscribe. I would love to continue growing this tiny community into a little bit less tiny, and I really enjoy making these videos for you. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.